Hey everyone, this is Marcel here. I want to say that I appreciate you stumbling across my video today. So as I've been wandering between classes and workouts over the past month or so, I've noticed a higher than normal percentage of single mothers loitering around somewhat aimlessly, and it made me think to myself, maybe I should make a video on dating single mothers. I'll get into what I think those particular women were up to towards the end of the video. It's not the main focus of the topic for me, just the inspiration for it. I'll start out with discussing some of my past experiences. I will roll that into how the interactions between the sexes change when there are children involved, in addition to pointing out some pretty obvious things that I think the average blue pill guy misses when it comes to dating women that are with kids. And then finally, I will sum up a number of the methods that these single mothers use when it comes to getting guys to take on a job that they weren't necessarily expecting or prepared for, at least based on my experiences and perception. Part 1, this video, is going to cover some of my past experiences, whereas the Part 2 video in the description down below will be my analysis of it. So if you're not interested in my past, you can go ahead and skip this video and click that one if you'd like. In regards to my experiences, the more notable ones, I was dating one woman. She was still married at the time, but she was separated. She had 3 kids in the 5 to 10 year range, and I would say that they were arguably the worst behaved children I have ever seen in my entire life. Where do I start? So I had to devise an alarm system to hook up to her front door to where when the kids tried to leave the house in the middle of the night, it would set off an alarm in her bedroom to wake her up so that she would know. So there was wires all over the place. It was before the time that remote stuff or door alarms was easily accessible. At least in our area, it wasn't. So I built it for her. And it worked pretty darn well. The kids weren't smart enough to whack them off the wall or anything. It certainly doesn't stop there. They like to sleep in their mother's room every night. Now we're talking 10-year-old kids here. If you try to convince them to stay in their own bedroom, they would throw a tantrum. Well, that presents a problem to the boyfriend if he's wanting some alone time with the mother. We got to a point where we had to lock them out of her bedroom. That worked for about an hour until the kids got pissed off and they would do things outside to make as much noise as possible. They would lay down on their backs and use their feet to kick the metal screen on the door to rattle the room. They would scream. Like one of the girls would stick her face up against the crack of the door and cup her hands over it and would scream blood-curdling murder at the top of her lungs. Until I finally had had enough, I walked over to the same crack, and right as she was inhaling, I blew through the crack in a real dusty environment. It had caked thick dust in the crack of the door jamb, and it blew it right into her mouth as she was inhaling. So there's this moment of dead silence, gasp, and then crying. It was, I don't want to sound cruel, but it was hilarious. Even her mom was laughing for a minute anyway, until she realizes oh crap. The kid was fine. It had just scared her. There's enough horror stories with that one woman's family that I could make several videos, but to summarize it, they never did get the discipline that they need to grow to be healthy children, at least emotionally or psychologically healthy. Another woman I dated had 2 kids in the 3 to 5 year range. She had a tendency to kind of downplay at first the fact that she was a mother, and then later on would emphasize it. And I'll get to more about that in a little bit. Her children came from several different fathers, one of which she had never disclosed who he was, and the kids fought, with one male, one female, fought almost constantly. The younger brother had some kind of mental issues, the little boy that is. Something was definitely off about him. And as for the mother, she also didn't give him the treatment that he needed to help him. I think in her case, though, she was too proud, or she didn't want other people involved with her life. But there were situations where he would just lock up in kind of a crying fit and fall over backwards and would lay on the ground in almost like a screaming seizure. And this was fairly regularly. Either he scraped his knee or if just for attention even. And you knew it was all for show, but even the fact that he was doing it, the reaction of his mother is truly what bothered me. She would sit there and just giggle and laugh at him. She thought it was the funniest thing in the world. And I would sit there and I would watch this thinking, do I need to call someone? Am I supposed to, do something about this? I was never allowed to actually say anything about the way the kids were treated or the way they were raised or anything about how she was parenting, because if I did so, then I was calling her a bad mother. And for that, she would go berserk on me. The house would be toxic for weeks as punishment. They ultimately wound up getting the care that they needed, but it was years later and maybe a little too late. Had nothing to do with me at that point. I didn't stay in the relationship long enough to fix that problem for her. But the kids wound up being better off in the end. I'll say that much. The elder daughter had her own issues too. I remember one day I was cleaning off a table or something, and I hear this stabbing sound behind me. I look, and she's swinging a pen at the upholstery that's built into the kitchen, and she's stabbing holes in it. And as I'm turning around, I'm about to react to that as she spins around towards her brother and raises that pen up in the air and goes to swing down. And I caught her hand as it was like a few inches from the back of her brother's neck. Now, to this day, I don't know if she actually would have stabbed him or not, but, wow. There's more to the story there, too, but for now, let's step away from bad experiences with the kids specifically. I've had women that I've gone out with that, one of them, for example, was a lady I met from work. Gorgeous woman. Didn't even look like she'd had kids. Other than a small scar on her chest, she was flawless. During our first date, she had all 4 of her kids with her from ages that make me wonder how late in her teens she was when she had her first kid. She was open about the fact that they were all from different fathers. They seemed fairly well behaved. They were good kids, no issues there. She had mentioned that one of them, the youngest, was actually, his father was another guy that we worked with. And during that date, asked me what my thoughts were on casual sex. Even though back then I was blue pill as they come, I could see the red flags with that one. You can just imagine the accidentally broken condoms, or oops, did I say I was on birth controls, that would come up the next day. I don't know if they fall under the same category, but I've had a number of women that have been dating me and wound up pregnant with some other guy's kid while they were dating me. That's happened more than once. Maybe they've gone out, partied, hooked up with some guys and got pregnant, or they had separate boyfriends on the side that they just didn't mention. I knew one woman worked with, same store, actually, had 2 children at the time if I recall correctly, hit on me for a while there, and I didn't respond. She actually wound up telling me at one point that she had some kind of a medical condition dealing with her ovaries or something that would only plague her unless she had a kid. So I guess the goal was that I would give her a kid and that would cure her painful medical condition. Does anybody know if that's real? Is that a thing? Like where they can get pregnant and it cures some kind of problem? Something to do with the lining in there. Anyway, so that was her story. Regardless, when I didn't show interest, she moved on to some guy in the store and was pregnant within 6 months anyway. So she got what she wanted. Kind of sum up my experiences, which, granted, most of the women that I dated were not single mothers. But the ones that were, and I would say they numbered in the dozens. Not to say that I slept with every single one of those, but I dated them enough to where I had an idea of what the experience would be. I can say, in regards to me, that every woman I have ever been with from different walks of life, from different ages, that has had kids, there has been a negative experience involving their children, whether or not I had anything to do with being around the kids. Somehow it negatively affected our relationship, maybe because of having to spend too much time, financial difficulties, problems with the father. And a lot of these mothers didn't even come from bad neighborhoods. Many of them were from big name families, had educations even, good jobs, some of them. I can honestly say that some of the experiences I had from these particular families surprised me that much was going on behind the scenes. But this video is starting to get a little bit long, so let's make that a wrap for part 1. And I will have the summary to everything, my thoughts, the psychological portion of it, in the next video that I will put in the description down below. I'm going to publish it today, so you're not going to have to wait for it. And if you have any comments so far, let me know down below. Let me hear what you think. Tell us some of your experiences. What have you had to go through when it comes to dating people with kids? Have you had any horror stories of your own? If you want to hear more content like this, like and subscribe, and as always, thank you.